Hey everyone, it's carsonmtech here, back with another video, and in this video, I'm going to be taking a deep dive look at the DJI Ronin-S and answering the question of whether or not it is still a worthwhile gimbal to pick up in the year of 2021. With this gimbal coming out at around 2 years ago now, it does lack a couple of features that some of the more new gimbals in the DJI lineup offer, but even still, on paper, this does offer some things over a lot of the budget gimbals out on the market that just simply cannot compete with this. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about what those things are. I'll be diving into all the features that this has to offer, show you some real world usage of this gimbal as well as some footage I got from it. I'll be showing you an unboxing, talking about how easy it is to balance this gimbal, and a whole lot more. But to start, we got to get into that unboxing. What do you think, Ronin? Should we get into the unboxing? Okay, let's get right into an unboxing.
Inside the box, you get two things: the foam carrying case, which has everything inside it, as well as some documentation that is located at the very bottom. When it comes to opening up the foam carrying case, it's actually pretty fun with the really well-built metal locking design that DJI came up with. Inside, I did pull out the small zipper case that has some accessories within it, but I'll set that aside for now and firstly get to assembling the gimbal. To do that, you'll need the grip handle, which just so happens to also be carrying the battery for the Ronin. For the bottom of that comes a very sturdy tripod, which screws into the 1/4-20 threads on the bottom of the battery grip. But if you are needing to mount the gimbal elsewhere, there's also a 3/8 16 thread for mounting as well. After getting the tripod on, next up comes the gimbal head, which has all the brains within it and mounts to the battery grip quickly and easily by sliding into the grip, and then you can lock it down with the locking lever on the side. At this point, the gimbal is nearly all put together, but you will need a way to mount your camera onto it, of course, and that's done with the Manfrotto style plate, which slides right into the mount on the gimbal head and locks in a similar manner to the grip lock. For storage, the gimbal comes with a large Velcro strip that holds the arms in place, but I honestly haven't used that since I got the gimbal, but to each their own. Lastly, within the carrying case is the 5-volt 3-amp power adapter. Going back to the small zipper case though, within it you have a riser plate, some miscellaneous hardware, a USB-C to USB-A charging/data cable, some RSS communication cables in the variants of IR emitter, USB-C, and micro USB. Then lastly, there is a lens support bracket as well as Allen keys for the aforementioned hardware. Now that I have everything out of the box, I'm not going to keep you waiting any longer. Here's a short edit of some of my favorite shots I've gotten so far when using this gimbal.
Alright, so now that you've seen some real world footage with this, I've got to say, I've been very impressed with it so far. I've been using this for a couple of weeks since I first got it out of the box, and I definitely have some thoughts about it. Using it in the real world is really fun to do, actually, especially if you've never had a gimbal before. It does get a little bit fatiguing after some time, but it is manageable. It weighs around 4 pounds itself, but it can go and support up to a 7.9 pound payload. So if you've got a really big camera or a camera with a really large lens on it, this can support a very heavy setup. But before getting into some of the things that I like about this and some of the things I don't like so much, I do want to talk about the controls on the gimbal itself. So to begin, one of the main things that you're going to be using on this is the joystick. So this joystick allows you to move your gimbal around pretty much wherever you want. The speed at which this controls the gimbal is adjustable depending on the setting that you're in, and you can also go and adjust it in the DJI Ronin app. If you want to change settings, you just press this M button right here, which changes between the 3 settings that are here. It comes standard with 3 distinctly different settings. One other thing that you've got here on this M button, or actually 2 things, is this: if you press it twice, will allow you to go into a portrait mode. So if you want to film a portrait video rather than landscape, it'll go and turn your camera to a portrait position. If you press it 3 times, it'll go into 360 rotation mode. This allows you to go and use the joystick and move the camera in a spinning manner. This looks really, really cool, especially if you slow it down and you are moving backwards or pushing forwards. It looks really cool in action. If you press the button 3 times, once again, it'll go back to the standard mode. Here on the back, this is a trigger, and this trigger does a couple of different things. So if you want to go and lock onto a subject and you do not want the gimbal to move no matter where you're moving, you can go and press and hold this trigger and it will stay locked into place. It does a really good job, but it also does some other things, such as if you press it 2 times, it'll stabilize and move the gimbal back to its original position no matter where the gimbal is. If you press it 3 times, it'll go and bring you into selfie mode. So this is quite heavy, and I'm not sure I could really go and hold this out in front of me like so for a while, but if you want to use it for that manner, you've got it. And then you've also got a record button. This record button only works, though, I will note, if you have an RSS cable plugged into the camera head, which will allow it to go and trigger the camera, as well as allow accessory usage if your camera supports it. So in this standard box, which is what I got, it comes with a focus wheel. And sadly enough, my camera is not supported, so this is actually something that really isn't that useful to me. Also, if you move to the front of this, you've also got 2 power ports. These are 12 volt 2 amp ports. This allows you to tap into this huge battery in the grip, which this is a 2400 milliamp hour battery. Doesn't really seem like that much, but on paper it says that this gimbal can go and function for 12 hours before the battery dies, which I have not used it for 12 hours yet, but I've got to say it is one of the best batteries in any piece of tech that I've owned. Like, a lot of the times when companies go out and say these different estimates, they are not even close at all. But this I've used now for probably over 6 hours in usage, and it has not even passed the 50% mark. So I would not be surprised if this even outlasted 12 hours of usage. Finally, moving down to this bottom part, you've got your power button here on the side. You've got your USB-C charging port. If you are going from complete 0%, it'll take you a little bit over 2 hours, actually, around 2 hours and 15 minutes to charge to full. The only other thing here really is the balancing knobs, which balancing this gimbal, it does not take very long at all. If you've never balanced a gimbal before, obviously it will take you a little bit of time to figure it out, but once you have that down, I found it taking me anywhere between 40 seconds to a minute and a half, just depending on the scenarios that you're balancing in. But overall, it's very easy to do, and if you've never balanced a gimbal before, here's a really short clip of me showing you how to balance this gimbal specifically.
When it comes to balancing the Ronin-S, or really any gimbal, you're going to want to make sure that you've got the gimbal on its tripod and that it's placed on a flat surface. Before balancing, this is the time where you should consider what you want to place on your camera when you're using the gimbal, all the way from microphones, cables, and even down to SD cards. To begin, if it's your first time balancing your specific camera setup, it's a bit of a game to figure out whether or not you need the riser plate in order to successfully balance the gimbal. You will need the riser plate if your camera just will not balance with the regular plate alone on the tilt axis because you've run out of adjustment arm length. After I mounted my camera with the riser plate, you have 3 total axes that you need to balance. You have your tilt axis, roll axis, and pan axis. On top of that, you should start by making sure your camera is mounted center on the mounting plate as well. To do that, hold the tilt axis steady and unlock the mounting plate and move it until you do not feel your camera tilting forwards or backwards anymore. Next, you should start with the tilt axis. Loosen the screw holding the axis in place and move the arm up or down depending on if your camera is staying upright or flipping upside down, respectively. You should know you've balanced this axis properly when the camera can be tilted anywhere and it stays put. Next is the roll axis. This one you perform the same process of trial and error until the tilt arm no longer falls left or right. When this axis is balanced properly, you should be able to move the camera wherever you want within the tilt and roll axes, and it should stay put. Finally, you have the pan axis, which is stabilized by tilting your gimbal at an angle and watching where the head falls to. Move the bracket until the gimbal head no longer rotates on its own, no matter where you move the grip. After that, you're all set. To verify you did everything right, turn on the gimbal, connect it to the DJI Ronin app, and then run an auto tune as well as a balance test to make sure everything is good. If you get all excellence following the balance test, you're set to now use the gimbal. With balancing covered, let's go outside and dive a little deeper into what else the Ronin app is capable of, because it can do quite a lot.
All right, so now that we are outside, just a very quick rundown of the DJI Ronin app. You've got things such as the balance test and the motor auto tune in here. You've got user profile. This is where you can adjust what each of the 3 modes when you press the M button do. This is adjustable in each of the modes, and you can highly customize everything based on your preferences. You can also go into control and motion, and this is where you can get more granular control of each of the settings. You've also got status, and this is just for some settings. Going back in though, create tab is also a very used aspect of this app. One of the main ones that I use the most is this virtual joystick. This virtual joystick does exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to move the gimbal around without actually touching it. This one's very convenient. The active track mode only works if you've got a mount for the top of your camera, and that'll basically just allow you to go and lock onto a subject, and the gimbal will move along with what is being tracked. Force Mobile is interesting. This one allows you to go and use the gyroscope inside your phone and move the gimbal based on where your phone is pointing. So this is how I did the intro of this video, if you were interested in knowing how I did that. Panorama and time-lapse modes only work if you've got an RSS cable plugged into your camera, so you have a supported camera. And this will go and allow you to autonomously take a panorama or take a time-lapse from the gimbal. You can set predefined points, and it will go and do everything for you, trigger the shutter, and take photos for you. It won't go and put everything together. Obviously, you're gonna have to do that yourself, but it is quite nice if you want some moving time lapses or you don't have a camera that can automatically do panoramas for you. The track mode is one that I actually use quite a bit. This one does work better if you've got an RSS cable, but you do not have to have an RSS cable in order to perform the movements with this one. You can set points, you can move your gimbal around, set different points, and you can even adjust the stay time that the gimbal stays at different locations and how long it takes to get to each of these points. And then once you are satisfied with how many points you put, you can just preview the move and it will do everything for you. This one is especially nice if you want a dual operator type of mode, but you don't happen to have 2 operators in the field that day. So this one I've used a couple of times. And lastly, that gaming controller mode is exactly what it sounds like. You can connect an Xbox or PS4 remote to the gimbal in order to control it without having to touch the gimbal. But with all that covered, that is the quick rundown of the DJI Ronin app. So let's get back inside because I am pretty cold. Man, okay, now that we're back inside, it was pretty cold. Let's talk about a couple more things that I like about this, and then I'll get right into what I don't like so much about this, and then finally answer that question of whether or not this gimbal is still worth it in the year 2021. So, as I said, some of my favorite things that I like about this come from the ability to have that mobile app that functions very, very well. But when it comes to the gimbal itself, there are still a couple things here that I really like as well. One of the main things that I like about this gimbal is how well it fits into the hand. Like, the ability for this to be held in your hand and to feel so well built is a very overlooked feature. Because when it comes to other gimbals that I've held before in the past, they just do not feel as sturdy. Even the tripod here on the bottom has rubber on the outside of the tripod, which they wouldn't have had to do, but because they did that, it feels like a full extension of the main battery grip here. And speaking of that grip, you get a really good grip when you're holding onto this. So that is definitely a huge positive here. Also, as I've already mentioned, but it should not go undermentioned, the battery life of this is very, very good. Like I said, I have not had a single issue yet with the battery. I have not even been able to drain it. It is a very good battery. So if you're out shooting for a long period of time, you should not have to worry whatsoever about this dying on the middle of a shoot. And finally, one of the last things that I really like about this gimbal isn't necessarily in regards to the gimbal itself, but what came with it, and that is in regards to the foam carrying case. The foam carrying case is a very, very nice carrying case, but there is a downside with that case, and that's kind of where we start to fall into some of the things I don't like about this gimbal. I will start with it being very annoying that you have to go and unlock all of your axes in order to put it into storage. So if you've balanced the gimbal you're going to have to go and unlock everything, which is very unfortunate because, you know, I mean, it doesn't take you forever to go and balance the gimbal, but it does stink that you have to go and put everything back down into a storage state in order to store it. Something also that's annoying is if you don't want to use that storage case, the axes can't be locked. A lot of other gimbals out there allow you to go and individually lock the axes just by pressing up a little switch or sticking in a pin or something like that, which it would be nice if it could just lock in like this, because then you can move it around and not have to worry about your camera being flung around and possibly hitting something. Another thing that was overlooked is the lack of an included RSS to a remote trigger wire. Pretty much any camera out on the market has a trigger wire in for remotes, which would have made it possible, if they had that cable included, to go and use the record button here on the handle to start and stop the recording or take a photo on your camera, but they didn't include one. And speaking of this RSS port, this comes with some of the most ridiculous rubber flaps that I have ever encountered in any technology. Literally, this rubber cap falls out all the time. It is constantly coming out, as well as the USB-C charge port is. This one isn't rubber, but it's plastic. This one does the same thing. It comes out very easily, and I just do not like how these don't have really tight tolerances. They just feel really loose and are constantly coming out. Something that isn't a deal breaker for the Ronin-S, but is something to consider when comparing this to newer gimbals, is that it does not come with an included display on the grip itself. So a lot of other gimbals do have that, and that allows you to quickly, on the fly, adjust settings, see what mode you're in, pretty much do everything on a little display, but it is something that is lacking on this one. And while we're talking about settings, although the Ronin app has so much going for it, one thing that is very odd, in my opinion, is the fact that you cannot update the firmware of this gimbal from the Ronin app. You have to go and download the DJI Assistant app on your Mac or on your PC in order to update the firmware, which is really strange in my opinion, considering DJI drones for literal years were able to go and update via the app. So why couldn't they make it where this gimbal could be updated from the app? I'm really not sure, but I don't know. They just did not include it, so that is a little bit of an annoyance. And finally, one of the last things also comes from within the app, or a function within the app, and that is the fact that out of the box, this did not come with a phone mount to mount your phone onto the top of your camera in order to use that active track mode. But on that note, that is pretty much all the things that I do not like about the gimbal. Everything else is just great about it. It does a very good job, and one of the big things that is underappreciated about this, if you pick it up yourself, is because this supports larger cameras, when you go and you put a lighter camera onto it, it actually does a really good job at stabilizing it and being able to take any impact that you throw at it. So with all these things being covered, now let's talk really quickly about the price. So this specifically is the starter bundle Ronin-S kit, and it retails for $529 US, which in my opinion is pretty steep, especially if you're in a scenario like me with a camera that isn't even supported through the RSS kit. So if you want to go and use this with that follow focus knob, you can't use it. But if you are in a scenario like me, you actually can pick up just the Ronin-S itself without the starter bundle, and that retails for $349. So if you are looking to pick up the Ronin-S yourself, I would recommend doing that. But there also are some other gimbals on the market nowadays that you can consider as well. Specifically, DJI has the RSC2, which retails for $499, and it actually fixes a lot of the things that were some downsides with this gimbal specifically. And that includes the fact that it comes with a screen on the grip. It's able to go and fold up, which is really nice for storage and traveling around. It also comes with locks on the axes, and overall it can support a very similar payload, although it can't support up to 7.9 pounds, but it's pretty close. And so if you are considering a gimbal and you're willing to pay for it, I would definitely recommend that one over the Ronin-S, considering this one is a little bit older. But also on the table, if you're looking around, is a very low-priced $329 DJI Ronin-SC Pro Combo Kit that is only $329, which is less than if you're getting just the Ronin-S itself. And that kit comes with the carrying case, comes with a bunch of accessories. It sadly doesn't have the folding ability of the RSC2, but it comes with pretty much everything that the Ronin-S has, minus the payload capacity. Also, the SC has a longer battery life and weighs a lot less. So if you're worried about becoming fatigued by holding a 4-pound gimbal, then the SC might be the better option for you. That one is quite a bit cheaper. So to answer the overall question of whether or not the Ronin-S is worth it in 2021, I gotta say, I think it still is. If you can pick it up on a discount somewhere, or you buy it in just the set where there is not the additional focus knob and stuff like that, although it would be useful if it was supported, then I think it is still worth it because it can support so much weight, it has all the features of the new things, minus a couple of little nitpicky things. So if you're looking to pick up the Ronin-S yourself, I will be leaving links to purchase it down in the description below. But with that being said, that is pretty much it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to let me know by clicking the thumbs up button down below, as well as clicking that circle subscribe button below to check out more videos from me in the future. And speaking of those, you can also check out my last video by clicking right over there, and a random video by clicking down there. But with that said, that is it for this video. I really hope it helped you out. See you in the next video. Peace.